Imagine the silence of a midnight river, a slow-moving vein of muddy water miles from the crashing waves of the coast, suddenly broken by a sound that should not exist here. It is a wet, explosive exhale, a rhythmic huff of air and spray that vibrates through the wooden piles of your dock. You shine a flashlight across the murky surface, expecting to see a log or perhaps a stray manatee, but instead, the beam catches a towering, obsidian dorsal fin slicing through the silt. This is the ultimate nightmare of the inland waterways, a transition from the vast blue horizon to the claustrophobic confines of the forest. The apex predator of the world's oceans has moved into your backyard, and the rules of survival have been rewritten overnight. The conflict begins with the disappearance of the small things. First, it's the river otters and the stray dogs that wander too close to the muddy banks. Then, the local fishermen begin to find their nets shredded, not by the jagged teeth of a shark, but by something with the strength to pull a boat backward against the current. There is a primal terror in knowing that the safety of the river, the shallow, predictable freshwater that has sustained human civilization for millennia, has been breached. The barrier between the deep, dark unknown of the abyss and the narrow channels of our inland lives has collapsed, and the intruder is far more intelligent than anything we have ever faced on land. For millions of years, the Ursinus orca has reigned as the king of the saltwater, a highly social and terrifyingly efficient killer. But what if the food dried up? What if the warming oceans and the collapse of offshore fish stocks forced these 6-ton wolves of the sea to look elsewhere? We have always taken comfort in the biological wall of osmosis, the idea that a creature built for the salt would perish in the fresh. But evolution is a desperate, violent process. Imagine a pod of orcas that has learned to regulate its kidneys, much like the bull shark, adapting its massive physiology to handle the lack of salinity. They would not arrive as visitors, they would arrive as conquerors. The danger of a river-dwelling orca lies in the lack of space. In the open ocean, prey has 3 dimensions in which to escape, a vast blue void to hide within. In a river, there is only upstream, downstream, and the shallow, muddy banks. The water is opaque, stained with tannin and sediment, turning the orca's greatest weapon, its sonar, into a godlike power. While you look at the brown surface and see nothing but ripples, the orca sees the skeleton of the river, the heartbeat of every creature hiding in the reeds, and the exact position of your feet as you stand on the shore. They are no longer hunting in a field, they are hunting in a hallway. As the pods move deeper into the river systems, the psychological toll on the human population begins to fester. Towns built on the water, once vibrant with swimmers and kayakers, turn into ghost towns. The sound of a splash at night is no longer a sign of a jumping fish, but a signal to run for higher ground. The orcas would quickly realize that the river is a conveyor belt of easy calories. Cattle drinking at the water's edge, deer crossing the shallows, and eventually, the people who thought the river was their playground. They would develop new hunting techniques, perhaps using the narrowness of the channel to create wave surges that wash unsuspecting victims off low-lying bridges or docks. The biological shift would be gruesome. The skin of an orca is sensitive, designed for the cold, sterile salt. In the fresh, bacteria-rich water of a river, their black and white hides might begin to scar and slough, giving them a mottled, ghostly appearance. They would look like monsters from an ancient myth, scarred titans rising from the silt. Their presence would decimate the local ecosystem. Every alligator, every large catfish, and every freshwater dolphin would be wiped out in a matter of weeks. The orca does not share territory, it consumes it. The river, once a place of life, would become a silent graveyard, a corridor of terror where the only sound is the heavy, wet breathing of the pods waiting in the dark. Imagine the first time a pod navigates a lock or a dam. Their intelligence is their most frightening trait. They wouldn't just be trapped, they would observe. They would watch the humans operate the machinery, waiting for the gates to open, or perhaps finding ways to leap over the low-head dams during spring floods. They would move inland, hundreds of miles from the sea, appearing in places where the word whale has never been spoken. In the heart of the delta, where the trees hang low over the water, an orca could hide its massive bulk in the shadows of the cypress knees, waiting for a boat to pass. The conflict would reach its breaking point when the orcas begin to hunt cooperatively with a focus on land-based targets. We have seen them tip ice floes in the Antarctic to slide seals into the water. In the river, they would learn to hit the banks with such force that the ground itself collapses. A family camping by the shore would feel the earth tremble before the water even moved. The orca doesn't need to come onto the land if it can bring the land into the water. This is the dark thriller of a shifting world, a world where the boundaries we trust are proven to be illusions. Scientific curiosity would quickly turn into a desperate war of attrition. How do you remove an apex predator that is smarter than your average dog and weighs as much as a school bus from a winding, forested creek? Nets would be snapped like sewing thread. Harpoons would only invite the wrath of a creature that mourns its dead and remembers its enemies. The orcas would learn the sound of our engines, the frequency of our sonar, and the patterns of our behavior. They would become the shadows in the water that we can never quite catch, the ghosts that haunt the edges of our civilization. Think of the silence that would fall over the great rivers of the world. The Amazon, the Mississippi, the Danube, they would all become hunting grounds. The mystery of the water would return with a vengeance. We have spent the last century feeling like we have conquered the natural world, mapping every inch of the earth and sea. But the arrival of the river orca would remind us of our place in the food chain. We are soft, we are slow, and we are terrestrial. In the water, we are nothing more than a curious vibration to be investigated and then extinguished. The horror isn't just in the bite, it's in the wait. It's the 3-minute intervals between breaths where the predator disappears into the brown bloom. You know it's there. You saw the fin. You heard the blow. But now the water is flat, reflecting the moon like a sheet of dark glass. Is it under your boat? Is it circling the pilings of your house? The river orca doesn't hunt with speed alone, it hunts with tension. It uses the claustrophobia of the environment to paralyze its prey. It waits for the moment you think it's gone, the moment you reach down to untie the line or dip your hand into the cool water to wash your face. In this new reality, the very nature of our relationship with the earth would change. The river has always been a symbol of life, of flow, of cleansing. But with the orcas, it becomes a symbol of the encroaching wild, a reminder that the ocean is not a separate world, but a hungry one that is constantly trying to reclaim the land. The conflict between human expansion and nature's resilience would find its most violent expression in these muddy waters. We would find ourselves building walls not against people, but against the tide, trying to keep the titans of the deep from swimming into our city centers. As the years passed, the river wolves would become a permanent fixture of our folklore. Children would be told stories of the black fins that rise in the cornfields during the floods. The aesthetic of the river would change, barbed wire along the banks, sonar buoys every 100 yards, the constant hum of underwater deterrents that the orcas eventually learn to ignore or even enjoy. The tragedy of the situation is the realization that we drove them here. By destroying their home, we invited them into ours. The orca in the river is not a freak of nature, it is a consequence. The final stage of the thriller is the realization that they are not leaving. They have found a new niche, a place where they are the undisputed kings, and the food is plentiful and unaware. The pod that first entered the river is gone, replaced by a generation that has never seen the open ocean, a generation that knows only the taste of silt and the sound of the forest. They have become something new, something darker. They are the guardians of the inland waterways, the monsters under the bridge that turned out to be real. When you look out over the water at dusk, and the light is hitting the ripples just right, you might see a shape that doesn't belong. A long, dark shadow moving against the current, silent and purposeful. You tell yourself it's just a trick of the light, a submerged log, or a trick of the mind. But then, you hear it. That heavy, wet exhale, a sound of pure power and ancient hunger. The river is no longer yours. It belongs to the one who waits beneath, the one who turned the peaceful stream into a hunting ground. The ocean has come for the land, and it has brought its most perfect killer. The thrill of the dark water is the knowledge that we are never truly safe. We live on the edges of a world we do not understand, and when that world decides to push back, it does so with a cold, calculated efficiency. The orca in the river is the ultimate symbol of that pushback. It is a mirror held up to our own hubris, a reminder that the apex predator is only the king until something bigger and smarter decides to move in. So, the next time you stand by the river's edge, watch the surface closely. Listen for the breath. And remember that the water is deeper than it looks, and the shadows have teeth. In the end, the story of the river orca is a story of adaptation and the terrifying beauty of nature's survival. It is a dark thriller that plays out in the silence of the mud and the reeds, a conflict that has no easy resolution. We are left with the image of a massive, scarred predator, rising for air in the middle of a quiet suburb, its intelligent eye tracking the movement on the shore. It is a new world, a darker world, where the river is a road for the monsters, and the sea has no limits. The threshold has been crossed, and there is no going back to the safety of the shore. The hunt has moved inland, and it will never truly end.